Howdy doody, my name is Cameron, better known as Venus Theory. This is the official ILIO YouTube channel, and for the last 10 minutes or so, I've had a big fat old bumblebee just smacking into my window over and over. So I may have the world's dumbest bee directly outside, and that's pretty exciting, I guess. Who wants to talk about Modular? I sure do. More specifically, in this video, I wanted to break down a couple of concepts for utilizing modular synths in your productions, in this case, Applied Acoustic Systems Multiphonics, by breaking down a track I made with it. Modular synths are obviously a ton of fun for sound design, and they're really fun just to sit there and sort of play with. But maybe you're like me when I was getting started with this stuff, where it's hard to sort of bridge that gap between the wet, wild, wacky world of modular and actually utilizing modular stuff in your songs. So even if this is your first time using Multiphonics, by the end of this video, hopefully you'll have a couple ideas to get started at using it in your productions. All right, here we are in the session. This is just a little cue I came up with, mostly going for sort of a big and bold electro stomping thing, maybe for something like a game advertisement or music for an exciting chase scene or something along those lines. So the first way to use modular synths in your music is, well, to use them to create synthy stuff. So once I had the general vibe of this track going here, I needed to transition into the big drop or climax of everything here. And for this level of energy and anticipation, I need something big and bold and mean, and Multiphonics is great for that. Multiphonics is monophonic, which means it plays one note at a time. So this means it's particularly well suited to things like aggressive bass lines, lead lines, or plucky arpy bits, or anything of that sort of nature. If you're not super keen on creating your own sounds from the ground up, there are a ton of presets in Multiphonics which act as a great jumping off point, or you can just use them as they are. For the main bass line here in the drop, I used this preset called Ping Pong Sync, which had a really great aggressive feel to it. But I wanted to take this up a couple steps further. To tame this sound towards the beginning of the track, I brought in an external filter plugin and just automated the cutoff, so it sort of opens up over time. Now, I could have done this within Multiphonics by automating the filter cutoff, but I wanted to bring in some additional distortion just to thicken out the sound because it is sort of the focal point of the track. Bringing in the additional distortion, we take that sound to this. As we open up the filter and we transition into the main drop here, though, this sort of becomes more of a lead synth line rather than a bass element. So for that, I needed to bring in a second supplementary bass layer to put underneath of it. To create this sub bass, I found another preset called Heatwave, which sounds like this. So it has a similar dark but aggressive and upfront feel. If we layer that with the main bass, things sound pretty cool. However, this patch has a little bit of stereo information to it, which we don't want in our sub bass. We want that to be more mono. So to do that, I just disconnected the right output here and left only the left output, which forces this to be mono. So again, just using the preset as sort of a jumping off point and tweaking it to fit what I needed to do. This is really the way I tend to utilize things like Multiphonics, where the presets are sort of a good jumping off point and can act as a sort of sketch pad where I can find something close and then go in and change connections or tweak the settings to dial it in a bit more for whatever flavor or role that patch is going to play in the mix. Now it was time to layer in a lead line. So for that, I used this patch called Arpathique here, which is pretty cool. It's a sequenced patch, and what I did is just disable the pitch modulation of the sequencers, so I'm getting just a stable sort of plucking sound. which just adds that kind of pacing and energy. But the cool trick with this was actually utilizing the macros. If we take a look in the DAW here, you'll see that I have macro 3 for this track being modulated from 0 to about 75%. And that takes it from this stable, plucky thing and totally transforms it into this really cool, screaming lead synth thing, which added a great sense of energy and movement without needing to have multiple patches going on. The macros in Multiphonics can be a really powerful tool to, in this case, entirely transform a sound, and all of this is really well documented in the patch info. So all I did was just play around with this, find some points where it sounded good, and then automate that in my session. With some additional processing with distortion and an automated filter, as well as just some basic reverb and delay stuff, it takes that patch and turns it into this. Opening up, building into the drop here, macro 3, and we have our final lead synth line. And it's really cool that all that is coming from a single patch. With all that put together, now our build up and drop sounds like this. So now we're really cooking with ketchup. Modular synths can also be a great way to add some extra effects, one-shots, or just that added sprinkle of pizzazz and fairy dust that makes a track stand out. So in this mid section here, I wanted to fill things out a little bit more because on its own, the sequence thing is cool, but I felt like there was just a need for a little bit of something extra. So to layer things up, I found this patch here, which is a really cool acidy filter sequence. And this layered really nicely with that plucking patch to start building that energy and anticipation for the big drop. With some additional automation and filter movement, now I was really getting things going, but I felt like there was a need for just one more subtle hint of something. Because we're building and building and building, but we're not quite there yet. There's no sort of connective tissue between these points. In my head, I was hearing just sort of a reverbed out mid-range growly thing just to complement the aggressive nature of the drop with the more chill nature of the intro without it being too overbearing. So I found this patch called Estranged, which sounds like this, which had that cool growly, filtery, acidy thing that complements the layers I've got going. It also has this nice, wide reverb lushness to it, and it has this really cool stereo thing, so it sort of swirls around all the other elements that are going on, and that's a really cool effect. Putting it all together and sort of burying the mid-range growl in the mix to some degree, we now have this. Which turned out really cool, I think. Building off those added bits of ear candy in the mix, because modular synths are capable of such a wide range of sounds and timbres, I thought it would be nice just to start building up a couple extra complementary layers to just accent the existing elements of the mix. In the case of this mix, after listening back, I thought that the drum section sounded cool. Had a great feel and energy to it, but it just needed that little bit of secret sauce thrown on top. After digging around, I found this patch called Sands of Time, which is a cool hi-hat sequence thing, but with some really great stereo information, which I felt the drums were missing. One of the cool things about this patch, though, is it has this clever macro that changes the character of the hats. So I just did this sort of moving sweep of this macro throughout the course of this entire track. That way the hats move and change and evolve in sort of a subtle way. So at the beginning, they're sort of dark and filtered, where it's almost more a percussion element than a hat, whereas when it's fully closed, it's totally bright and open. And then we move back about halfway between, and I think you get the idea. So layering that in with all the drums, I had the completed drum section. It's a pretty subtle difference, but I think it really helps sort of bring everything home for the drum section. Throughout the beginning and the first section of the track, I thought that these keys would benefit from just an added layer to them that just added a bit more warmth. So in good old Multiphonics, I found this patch called Alternating Current, which sounds like this. And with a bit of added delay and reverb, it really feels a lot like that key sound, just a bit warmer, and layered together, it sounds pretty cool, I think. The problem with this is that Multiphonics is monophonic. So what I ended up doing is taking the chords I had written for the keys part and just breaking out single notes from it to use this to layer certain tones of the chord, as well as build out a melody by just sort of playing with the single notes and rearranging them across the clip, which was a cool way to add this subtle extra layer underneath the keys. This patch also has a macro controlling the filter, so what I did is bring just the keys layer into that mid section with all the acidy, filtery break stuff and darkened it leading into the drop, just sort of rounding off the two sections and bridging those final bits of a gap between the two sort of energies of this track. And that really helped get from A to B. Of course, we can't talk about Modular without talking about really weird effects and other sorts of patches. So throughout the course of this track, I had these transitional effects that are just different things put through tons of reverb and delay and filters and things like that. And I thought these were cool, but maybe they just needed that extra bit of oomph to really sell the idea. Multiphonics, conveniently enough, actually has a sweep category, which makes it really easy to create and find these transition effects and use these as sort of a sound design utility to design your own transitions, with these being, again, sort of a coloring palette where you can sort of tweak outside the lines a bit. So metallic sweep here sounds like this. And I thought that was a really cool stereo movement, but it has this sort of tone to it, which to me almost sounded like a robot voice, and I wanted to enhance that a little bit. So I grabbed another preset here called Vocalized, which is a vocally effects transition in the sweeps category. And I thought that these two layered really nicely together. Putting all those transitions together with these added layers on top, we now have this. Which I think sounds awesome. So all together in the oven at 350 for about an hour, we get this. So that is a look at a couple of different ways you can utilize Multiphonics and Modular in your productions. By using the presets as a sort of jumping off point or utilizing the macros to transform the sounds, you can pretty quickly get it working in a track without necessarily needing to be a more experienced modular synth enthusiast. Multiphonics from Applied Acoustic Systems is available now, and if you want to check it out for yourself, you can find more information with the link down in the description below. Thanks for joining me here and hanging out with me for a bit. A big thank you to ILIO for having me back on the channel again. I hope you enjoyed the video, I hope you learned something, and as always, I hope this inspires you to get out there and make something awesome.